welcome back. Thanks for watching. You haven't watched anything yet, but I'm thanking you ahead of time. I had a couple of, perhaps a few questions asked to talk about in terms of the Chris Watts case. And one of the questions was, I apologize if there's a lot of sound on the road and there's a little bit of wind. So if the wind is too much, I won't hang this video. If the sound is okay, then I will. One of the questions that was asked has to do with life in prison, or the life expectancy, or the psychological effects of prison on people. And Dr. Todd Grandy, I've been watching his videos, I've been following him on YouTube, has a video on that topic. He has researched it and it's backed by all that he's researched. What I can summarize somewhat on what he said, and I hope I make it to him justice, is that it's a very profound principle that I really find almost spiritual. And in terms of the conclusion that he has at the end, one of the things that he explained is that people who are wrongly convicted and prison incarcerated, those people grow bitter and more distrustful of other people. Once they're back released in society, they become more distrustful, and of course they're very unhappy about the incarceration. However, people who are guilty of their crimes, they seem to fare okay in the prison system, but the most significant finding that I got from his video, and I will link his video below in the description, is that people who commit crimes, whatever the crimes are, whether it's murder or some other crime, with time in prison, their self-esteem seems to increase. The profound part of this that I feel there is that even though people avoid going to prison, even if they're guilty of crimes, and they try to get away with crime, and they try to not have to go to prison for what they do, I wonder if there's a soul component that feels alright about paying for their crimes. Something that knows that there is justice, and perhaps the soul feels somewhat redeemed. This is my take, my theory, my speculation, that the soul might feel somewhat redeemed about paying for what they've done. And that's all I'm thinking, that the soul does seek atonement. There's a part that might feel good about atoning for the wrong they've done. There's certain wrongs, for instance, in the case of Chris Watts, doing what he did is nothing can repay the grievous deeds that he did, killing children, killing his own little children and his own pregnant wife. But going back to Chris Watts, the take that I get is when I hear him confess, and when I hear him talk about his time in prison, and when I hear him talk about what he's getting for a meal, to me he doesn't seem very perturbed about being in jail, in prison. It seems almost as if there's a part that recognizes that it was due, and he's not saying, yippee, here I am in prison, but a part of the person seems to be on terms with the fact that acceptance for their crimes. And the confession does that. I'd like to mention something. I watched the tape of that colonel, or this high-ranking Air Force man in Canada. Canada who killed, we know, at least 3 women. He started off breaking into houses and stealing their underwear. He had pictures of himself wearing those underwears, women's underwears. And then he got bolder and bolder. And then he started stalking them inside their house. And he was in their house while they were in their house, undressing, whatever they were doing. And then it escalated to the point where he raped one woman in her house. And then the next time, he actually killed him. And he had a very good, I would say, stellar interrogator. When they had, at first they almost, the woman that was raped identified his neighbor, because all the crimes were happening around the periphery of where he lived, around the area where he lived, his neighborhood. So somehow one of the women that was raped identified his neighbor, and so the eyes were on his neighbor. Anyway, what happened was the police gathered much more information and data, because on the second murder that he did, he actually had his car parked near the house, and a couple of people saw his car. Once somebody identified the car, and people came forth with information. Anyway, I'm giving a lot of details, but the thing is that during the interrogation, they had him cornered. They had every bit of information that they needed. They called him in to come and talk with the police. He came very cocky, smiling, chewing gum, thinking perhaps that he was going to just inculpate his neighbor, talk about his neighbor, because they probably thought that it was his neighbor. And little by little, very artfully, you see this police interrogator bringing up one thing after another, asking him questions, and then very artfully bringing up the data that they had. The bottom line is that finally, when this gentleman, well, you can call him that, he was more of a monster. When this individual finally saw himself that there was no point in saying anything else that was untrue, he finally confessed. There was that point, he had to confess. He didn't like it, but he confessed. He started to fess up. The difference that I'm trying to point out with Chris Watts is that this other individual, once he had to confess, he stopped lying. He stopped saying any more lies. He just had no more lies to say, no more lies to tell, no more going around, no more things. He was concerned about his wife knowing what had happened, because he was married at the time, and he, at points where he had to describe what he did to one of the women, he had difficulty saying it. But he didn't come up with a story. He just said, yeah, I hit her over the head. It wasn't easy for him to say that he did that, but he stopped lying. So that's why I'm thinking that there is a difference between certain psychopathic traits and Chris Watts perhaps having a narcissistic personality trait of some sort, like is it reverse narcissism or is it vulnerable narcissism. And that Chris Watts continues to lie and continues to not just simply say everything that happened. I mean, it's done. It's a done deal. There's not going to be much difference because he got the least amount of punishment, which is the life imprisonment instead of getting death sentence. Now, when I was listening to, I've been on the fence with the death penalty because I do believe in the death penalty so long as you are a gazillion amount of time certain that you have the right person. So it's like beyond the reasonable doubt. I have difficulty with innocent people being fried, going to the death penalty. And we've had lots of wrongful convictions, and that is the only thing that bothers me about the possible death penalty. But listening to the perspective of people rotting in jail, rotting without having anything, looking forward, nothing, no real lesson that you could really think of. I mean, they're just literally rotting in jail. It almost seems like the most merciful thing is to really, the rightful thing might be to give the death penalty. If Chris Watts was to appeal his sentence, I would wonder if maybe what he would want to appeal is the sentence and change it. Instead of shortening it from a life in prison without parole, he might be rethinking the death penalty. I've heard that sometimes some people may not be able to commit suicide, but they'll pay someone who's on other lifers, what they call, to do it for them. He doesn't look suicidal. We'll have to see what happens with that. So going back on this thing about the narcissism, I have difficulty with just narcissistic traits or narcissistic personality disorder, because just narcissistic traits in general are I'm finding are very common in our society. There's a lot of narcissism to go around, and you can go, it's a spectrum. Narcissistic personality disorder is a very specific category, but when you talk about narcissism in general, there's a spectrum, and it goes from what people might even coin as healthy narcissism, if there's such a thing, to pathological levels of narcissism. And it's so common in society. I find it's so common. I keep seeing narcissistic traits probably in all of us, that I just don't equate narcissism with murder necessarily. Anything is happening, anything can happen, and everything is possible. But my understanding is, a person that is pathological narcissist, they usually don't dirty their hands. They don't, for the most part, they may not get in trouble with the law. Antisocial personality, which has a lot of narcissism and is a different story, but they might induce or influence someone to commit the crimes instead. They can be that sick in the head, they can be that bad. Now, when it comes to murders in cold blood, like the case of Chris Watts, I tend to think more of psychopathy. And then repeating myself again is the part about possible planning, the fact that he confessed that it was 45-minute ride with the girls and then he killed them. It talks about premeditation and lots of time to think about it before doing something. It talks about doing things in cold blood. Bella pleading for her life, saying no daddy, and he still did it. He just does it. That's what a psychopath will do. A person will be begging for their life, and a psychopath will still kill them. They have no remorse. So then also showing that lack of remorse at the end, when he was talking with the press, he looked like a very rested man who took a shower, who took care of his appearance to look nice before the cameras. He didn't show any desperation. He didn't show any remorse. He was cool as a pickle, just going dandy about his day. And also, just even right after the crime, going to work and going about his day like nothing happened. Anyway, so all of these things about psychopaths, trouble with narcissism. The other question that I had was talk about women who are attracted to Ted Bundy's and Chris Watts's and Scott Peterson's Dr. Todd Grandy. He's not a psychiatrist. He's a PhD, and of course he can use that pronoun of that title of doctor. Also talked about this, and he said, I believe it was him that he talked about, there are psychological reasons why these women may fall in love or be attracted, and I'll link that below also because he explains it better. I'll just touch on it. There are psychological issues with the woman's psychology. Some women may have, that's all they know is the dangerous type, the dangerous bad guys that cause harm to others, in that darkness that they find it seductive, they find it attractive. And so if you're attracted to any of these, you might want to check here and here and see what's going on. And I think that I have bumped throughout these videos and some activity on Facebook, and social media in general, I have bumped into some people. I don't know who they are, but I have found people ravishly defending Chris Watts, trying to make excuses for what he did, and practically being almost downright nasty towards anyone who says different. Very insidiously not nice at all. So you can see that I pair having personality issues along that behavior with the sympathy towards murderers like that. Lastly, I would like to say, somebody asked, and I said it in one video and I'll say it in this one. My name is Jennifer. I live in Montana, beautiful Montana. I live about 1 hour away from the north entrance to Yellowstone National Park. I'm very close to nature. There's beauty around where I live. And my background, I'm a registered nurse by trade. I don't have extensive hands-on experience in psychiatry. There's nurses that branch out into psychiatry, but in my clinical rotations I did have clinical training on psychiatry, and we went over all the different disorders, of course, and then we did hands-on practice during our clinicals while I was in nursing school in the psychiatric ward. I also have worked a lot with patients with dementia. So I have a little bit of a foot into that area, but I also have done a great deal of reading and studying because psychology really fascinates me. I think that we all need to heal and work on our psychology and heal it, because all of us have issues. None of us had perfect patterns. I think parents are the same thing, as very similar word as patterns. None of us had perfect parents, nobody, because there's no perfect people. We all had different things that we had to deal with. So we all could use counseling, we can all use therapy, we can all use working on ourselves. And my theory is that if everybody did that, it would be a much better world. Take a bet on that. 10-4. Have a very nice day. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching.